Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Central Pennsylvania, Dogman. I am currently a resident of Altoona, Pennsylvania. I am writing this to report a strange encounter I experienced with a friend of mine in the early morning hours of March 17, 2013. The incident is now over 2 years old. I chose not to report this event prior to now due to an unwillingness to expose myself, or my family and friends, to public scrutiny. In light of the recent spate of similar sightings in central Pennsylvania, I have changed my mind. Perhaps our experience will help with the current research. As such, I would like to make my intention clear that myself and any persons mentioned please retain anonymity at this time. Reporting a Bigfoot or even a UFO sighting is one thing, but this is somewhat different. On the evening in question, a friend and I were returning from a job that I had performed in Williamsburg, Pennsylvania. My friend was driving. To the best of my recollection, the incident occurred somewhere between 1:30 a.m. and 2 a.m. on the morning of March 17th. We were traveling SW on Route 22 through what is locally known as GC Town, a rural suburb of Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. As we rounded a little curve in the road, our attention was drawn to our left on the opposite side of the road. Standing and squatting in a clearing a few feet off the side of the road was some kind of creature. My friend wasn't driving very fast and slowed a bit as we approached. Our initial view of it was from its dorsal side, as it was facing away from us. It came into profile as we passed with its right side to us. It struck me immediately that the creature had a combination of both human and canine features. It was squatting down on its legs close to the ground, but was doing so in a bipedal fashion. The legs had the stifle joint and hop characteristic of a canine, not like a human leg. It had its front limbs or arms in front of it, and I believe it was possibly crouched over something, maybe a smaller animal. The arms were long in proportion to its body. I recall thinking the hands were more human-like as opposed to paws. Its torso seemed to be somewhat hunched forward. I had the impression that at any moment it could have gone to all fours quite comfortably. The creature's chest was not broad like a human's, but had a pronounced forward-angled breastbone like a canid. It gave an impression of great strength, having distinct and well-defined musculature, but was not built on a massive frame. It seemed more thin and sinewy. If it had stood fully erect, I would estimate that the creature would have been close to 7 feet tall. It was covered in fur that was grayish-silver in color. The creature seemed unnaturally shiny, although this could have been a reflection from the headlights of the moon. It had pointy erect canine ears that were somewhat laid back on its head. The head was large and very wolf-like in overall appearance. The muzzle was also very wolf-like or canid, although the snout wasn't exceptionally elongated. It had canine-like teeth. To the best of my recollection, the eyes were an amberish color, but may have had a reddish glow reflection to them. It had a wolf-like tail. It turned its head to watch us and tracked us as we passed. It seemed quite aware of our presence. My friend and I continued in stunned silence for a few moments. When the creature was no longer in view, I turned and asked my friend what we had just seen. "We just saw a freaking werewolf," were his exact words. I agree that that was pretty much my own assessment. I asked if he would turn the car around, but he absolutely refused to do so. We spent the rest of the trip debating as to whether it could have been a dog or even someone's escaped pet wolf, but to be honest, it just wasn't. I'm sure of that. Both my friend and I are experienced outdoorsmen, and neither one of us have ever seen anything fitting that description before. I was actually raised not far from the area and know it quite well. I have spoken to my friend about this, and either one of us would be willing to take a polygraph concerning this incident. Please feel free to contact me about any questions you may have. Thank you, name withheld.
Bipedal canine cryptid reported near Taylors Falls, Minnesota. I live in Taylors Falls, Minnesota, and I was driving north on Wild Mountain Road around 7 a.m. on Jan 2nd. I was heading for the ski area when I saw some kind of animal running in the field towards the river. I pulled off the road and grabbed my binoculars. It looked like a large wolf, but it was different. By that time some guy in a truck pulled up and was wondering what I was looking at. I told him that I think there is a large wolf in the field. He got out of the truck and asked to use the binoculars. He said he didn't think it was a wolf and that it looked like it was chasing something. We stood for a few minutes watching. It would run into the woods then pop back into the field for a bit. The light was getting better, so I grabbed my parka and started to walk closer to get a better look. The other guy said he had to leave, but did say again that he didn't think it was a wolf. I was about a half mile from the ski area near one of the trail roads. I started to walk towards the river. I was about 100 feet from where I saw the animal from the road when I heard an owl screech coming from the woods to my right. On the edge of the woods, this huge dog came running out of the trees. The best way to describe it was that it looked like a big hyena, but it ran on two back legs and bent over. It had woolly black hair all over its body and a long thick tail. It must have weighed 200 pounds or more. I've been in the woods all my life and have never seen anything like this. It looked over at me, but continued to run from right to left in front of me. It also made a steady loud panting sound as it ran. I turned on a pivot and ran out of there, hoping this animal wasn't going to chase me. When I got to the car, an old man had pulled off and standing there watching me. He wondered what I was doing. I yelled at him to get the hell out of there and said that a monster dog was out there. I think he believed me because the look on his face showed fear, like he knew something was really out there. I didn't go to the ski area. Instead, I went back home all shook up and asking myself what I saw. I read the stories about the Michigan Dogman and something you had about one being seen in Wisconsin. What do you think this was? It was no wolf or any other animal native to the area. Please don't use my name if you pass this along. This is my work email. I can send you another later. The guy who sent me your email address told me that there was a sighting last year just west of Duluth. He said it was a hunter that came across it while tracking a deer he had shot. I don't know the details, but if it looked like the animal I saw, I'm sure he got the hell out of there. Thanks, Jay.
Massive upright werewolf observed near Denmark, Wisconsin. I'd like to share an encounter I had in 2005. I was 12 years old at the time, and it happened on my grandparents' property, out in the country near Denmark, which is southeast of Green Bay, Wisconsin. The area has a lot of farmland, with patches of woods. My grandparents own a few acres of land, and on the far right corner of their yard, there's a thick patch of woods and swamp that goes on for a bit before hitting another farm field. I was standing on the back deck, shooting cans with my BB gun. It was a hot and muggy morning in July, and all morning I just had a really eerie feeling that I couldn't shake. It was like I was being watched, but every time I'd look around the yard I never saw anything. I just kept going back to shooting cans when I felt the feeling again. I started scanning the tree line of the woods this time, and that's when I saw it. It was standing next to a tree, and it was absolutely massive. When I got older, I went back to that tree and tried to get an estimate on the height. I'd say it was 7 to 7.5 feet tall. The only way I can compare the body is to that of Arnold Schwarzenegger's. It's unreal how big its shoulders, arms and chest were. It was covered in gray fur that was really shaggy and thick on its shoulders and down part of its body. I know when people describe Dogman, you hear a lot of, it looked like a timberwolf standing on two legs. Or, it had the head of a German shepherd. This was not like that at all. The head and face looked like a werewolf. It had pointed ears on top of its head, its eyes were yellow, and almost seemed to glow even in the daylight. It was snarling with its lips open, and it almost seemed to be smiling. The look and smile on this thing's face was pure evil. Sinister is the only way I can describe it. I don't recall if it had a tail or not. I feel like the legs looked like that of a human's, and not bent like a dog's. However, I was mostly looking at the head and body. After what had to be only about 10 seconds, it seemed longer. Without warning, it broke eye contact with me and took off sprinting to its right. It went through some really thick brush, emerged farther down the tree line, and took off into the woods. The thing is, no person could clear what it cleared in the time that it did. It was seconds that it ran, probably a good 50 to 60 yards, and it was all thick brush through there. Being absolutely terrified, I went back in the house and didn't go outside the rest of the day. My aunt came up to me later and said, "I heard some strange things outside last night. I've been meaning to tell you, but I didn't want to freak you out." I didn't tell her what I saw, thinking she'd think I was crazy or making it up, but I insisted she tell me. She said she heard a loud growling and snarling walking around the house the previous night, unlike anything she's ever heard before. I still visit my grandparents quite often and haven't seen anything since. I haven't heard of any other reports from the area, but I know there was a Bigfoot seen crossing the road nearby in the 1960s or 70s. St.
Upright Lycan Petrifies ex-Marine in Massachusetts State Forest. I had a Dogman encounter on November 15, 2015 in October Mountain State Forest near Lee, Massachusetts. I have been an avid outdoorsman, bushcrafter, hunter, survivalist for over 3 decades. I have hunted all over North America, Alaska, Anticosti Island, have come across every predator: cougar, black bear, brown bear, wolves, coyotes. What I saw that Sunday morning was no bear. It was no more than 75 feet from me. I was on the tail end of a 5-day solo. I had made camp on top of a ridge about 250 feet from a river below me. It was at dawn and I made my way down to the river to retrieve some water to make coffee. The river flows hard and makes quite a bit of noise due to outcrops of rocks in middle of it. As I got closer to the water, I noticed what appeared to be a bear bent over at the water's edge. Now the last thing you want to do is spook a bear. I carry a whistle around my neck which I blow periodically as I'm hiking for that specific reason, to alert bears that I'm coming through. So I blew the whistle. As soon as I blew the whistle, the creature's head spun around. Again, I still thought it was a bear, but as its head turned, its shoulders started turning with it. It was then I instantly knew it was not a bear. It had a canine head. It methodically got up, in no rush. It got up on its hind legs, then turned completely around. I was in 1st Battle Fallujah, May 2004, 2nd Battalion 1st Marines, and I was afraid, scared every time I went live. But adrenaline took over and I could deal with my fear. But the fear I felt that day was nothing I had ever experienced. I was frozen in fear and could not move. I had a .45 caliber sidearm on me and have drawn that gun thousands and thousands of times at the range. I could not get myself to reach for it. I was petrified. It seemed like a lifetime. It was standing there looking at me. But it was maybe less than a minute. It broke right, got down on all fours, went into the bush. I stood there for maybe an hour motionless until I got the courage to move. BB.
Possible Dogman encounters in Milford, Michigan. I wasn't really sure if what I saw was real, but after talking with some friends and reading your blog, I've decided to tell my story. Now, keep in mind I live in the small town of Milford, Michigan, and I've heard some bizarre stories. But I wasn't too sure about what they were describing: a tall creature that creeps on 4 legs until startled or entering chase, then proceeds to stand on 2. A tall dark figure that looks like a dog, I thought. These people must be crazy. Deer can do some weird stuff. My friend recently described a story of an encounter about a year earlier. My friend, let's say, Sam, went outside to have a smoke around 12 midnight 1 a.m. in the morning. His yard has a hill that slopes down from his circle driveway all the way to a flat area near his basement door. If you walk out of the basement, directly in front of you is a pond, and to the left is a shed they used to use. At first he noticed nothing. But as he looked closer, he noticed a dark figure on all fours. He took out his cell phone and shined his flashlight on the creature. To his surprise, the thing stood up on 2 legs, screeched at him, then ran off into the woods. He told us about this encounter the next morning and took us to the spot he saw it. Sure enough, there were dog prints. That wasn't really unusual though, because he lives next to a subdivision, and we've already helped his neighbors find their dogs about 3 times since they've moved in, so we shrugged it off. He then brought me into the woods where the creature ran into, and there was clearly a path that something took to get through. As much as Sam tried to convince me, I still thought it was a deer. That's until recently. Then on December 24, 2014, I went for a drive to go to Walmart to pick up some beer just to relax and hang out with friends. Everything was perfectly fine. The moon was out so you could see just a little bit, and there was no snow or rain, just a little dampness on the road from a previous rainfall about an hour beforehand. I was on my way back to my house and driving up a curvy hilled road up to the top of the hill, the only one in my subdivision, and I noticed something in my neighbor's yard. Now, I see deer in the subdivision all the time, and I've actually hit one on 1 occasion, so I decided to slow down. This thing was definitely the same size as a deer, so I didn't have any second thoughts. That is, until I got close and it ran in front of my car. Now, normally when deer run in front of your car, they either freeze or run right by, and there are normally 2 or 3 of them. This was a single case, and when it ran across the road, albeit on 4 legs, it didn't run the same as a deer. When it ran, it didn't lift its head, it had it low to the ground, and looked like it was sniffing something. It then lifted its head and looked, more like glared, at me and bolted off to my right, but not before, shortly after, stopping right out of my view. I could still see the figure standing there, but I couldn't make out what it was. All I could see was it standing on its hind legs and what looked like staring at me. I kept trying to get my eyes to adjust from the bright of my headlights to the dark of the side of the road, but it just wouldn't happen. When I tried to turn my car around so I could shine my headlights at it, it bolted down the hill and into the woods, all while staying on 2 legs. I still remember the face that I saw when the thing glared at me. It looked like a wolf, but was the size of a buck. That was the scariest moment of my life, and I have never seen anything like that before. I've googled some information about it, and I found something about the Michigan Dogman, but I don't want to be classified as one of the crazies. I can still see it standing on its hind legs looking at me in the dark. GG.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.